Story 1. The only Turkish delight available in the UK was from a British brand, and it was rubbery, artificial, and covered in chocolate, making it incredibly disappointing. I have since tried authentic Turkish delight, and it is quite delicious. I'm not a fan of rose flavor, but pistachio is amazing, although the powdered sugar can be a choking hazard. I can only assume that 1950s Britain had access to the real thing. Story 2. I was deeply disappointed and traumatized when I, as a child, asked if I could try the magical Turkish delight that looked so delicious in the movie. The response I received was, "You are wrong. This is Cyprus delight, not Turkish. It will never be Turkish." My introduction to the reality of Turkish delight was accompanied by an introduction to its regional geopolitics. Story 3. Here is the revised text. Here's the thing, Narnia takes place during World War II. The kids end up in the house where they find the wardrobe because they were evacuated during the outbreak. Turkish delight was already an expensive, luxurious treat before. During wartime, when sugar was strictly rationed and a child might have good reason to think that candy could be something they might never see again, the idea of it is unthinkably decadent. To Edmund, it must have seemed like asking for ambrosia itself. With that in mind, I live in a prosperous region during one of the most affluent times in human history. I can barely step out my door without encountering candy. I have a consistent issue with sugar being added to foods I do not want sugar in, like bread. That is how sucrose-rich I am, and I'd still sell out my family for the right kind of Turkish delight. The apricot variety, that's the best. Story 4. The first time I tried Turkish delight, it was homemade and delicious. It was super fresh and bouncy, much better than boxed candy. Story 5. I had a similar experience. I worked in a deli that sold those items, but no one ever bought them. I would try them before discarding them. It was very disappointing. I would not betray friends and family by recommending them. Story 6. Pro tip. You need to get the authentic food from a legitimate Turkish restaurant. I experienced the same disappointment as many others, but I have also had something amazing. Story 7. I don't know the book or film, but the first time I tasted lakumi, which is known as Turkish delight, I fell immediately in love. Story 8. Authentic Turkish delight from Istanbul is much better than what you will find in the United States. It is not sacrifice and betray your family to an evil queen good, but it is tasty. Story 9. A palpable disappointment was an important lesson for a young person facing unknown challenges ahead. It was akin to the Star Wars holiday special of candies. Story 10. I am very disappointed because I had the rose flavor, and it tasted like perfume. I have heard there are other flavors, but I have never seen them. Story 11. I always assumed it was like baklava, which might be the best dessert. I was pretty disappointed. Story 12. I actually adore rose-flavored desserts, so I was thrilled with this discovery. I'm not sure if rose is the default flavor, but I regularly purchase rose-flavored Turkish delights. Story 13. My dad loved them, and even if finishing one could bring him back, he would still be dead. Story 14. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so I was surprised to see that the candy maker has recently been packaging those same candies in a Turkish delight box, which I assume is specifically targeting the fans of Narnia. Story 15. My mom smoked Camel cigarettes. I asked to try a Turkish delight after seeing the movie, and she told me I was too young to smoke. Story 16. I was amazed by it, and I'm lucky to live near Dearborn, where it is popular enough to prioritize quality. I had strawberry, apricot, and pistachio flavors during my first sampling, and I fell in love. Story 17. There was a fried chicken place near me called Chicken Delight. As a child, I mistakenly thought Turkish Delight was a bucket of fried chicken. I was very disappointed to find out it wasn't the crispy, rich, salty, spicy, deep-fried goodness I imagined. Story 18. I was bitterly disappointed. My friend, you sold out your family for this? An evil sorceress essentially says, name your price. And this vaguely sweet soap is the best you could do. Yes, I know about the sugar rationing, and I acknowledge that I have more access to processed sugar than the majority of people throughout history, but I was expecting something amazing. Story 19. One of the neighborhood kids who was friends with my sister was obsessed with the book series. When he begged me to watch the movie, he picked up Turkish Delight to share while watching. Since it was not built up, I was indifferent to the taste, but this kid was so upset. You could tell he had built it up for himself, yet he didn't want me to know he was disappointed, so he ate most of it while making strange faces. Story 20. I am very disappointed, but the experience was wonderful. I had a teacher who was notorious for being mean, and if you were assigned to him, you were made to believe you would be beaten. He was definitely surly and strict, but to this day, he is the educator who has taught me the most and remains my favorite teacher ever. He was actually a very kind man beneath it all, but he had standards and was very committed to them because he knew they would make us better students, and he was right. When we read or watched Narnia, he went out of his way to find us good quality Turkish delights. We were all shocked when he brought them in because he was the last teacher anyone would suspect of bringing in treats for his students. He said he absolutely loved them and was excited for us to try them. When he handed them out, I expected them to be delicious. My classmates and I practically all hated them, but we pretended to love them because our teacher had done something so unexpectedly kind, and we didn't want him to be hurt. One of my biggest regrets is not telling him how much he had taught me. I am in school to become a teacher now, and he helped inspire that. Just before I was going to visit him, I ran into someone I went to school with, and she let me know he had just passed away. He was older but young enough for it to be an unexpected shock. I still think of him all the time, especially when I see anything related to Narnia or Turkish Delight. Story 21. I love Turkish Delight. I don't know what everyone is talking about. So good. And my favorite flavor is rose. Story 22. I am so happy to hear someone else say it. I was just telling a Turkish woman I met a few weeks ago that it really did taste terrible. Story 23. I was in a store that had a whole case of different types of Turkish Delight. I thought it was not very good, and I remember feeling disappointed with it. Story 24. I have been disappointed several times because I keep thinking it must have been stale, that it was an inferior brand, or that the rose flavor would be better. Story 25. I love Turkish Delight. There are many kebab shops around me that also sell it alongside baklava, so it's pretty easy to find some decent options. Story 26. I liked it. The texture combination of nuts mixed with gummy bears was unusual, but it worked. However, I am not a fan of the flour-flavored variety. Story 27. I tried one a few days ago with my boyfriend, and I told him that if I were one of Edmund's siblings, I would have drowned him. Tasted like chocolate-covered jello, in my opinion. Story 28. I always thought it was heavily implied that the Ice Queen seduced Edmund and the Turkish Delight was just a metaphor because Lewis couldn't write that in a children's book. Story 29. Real Turkish Delight from Turkey is great. The imitation made in America is not related and is unappealing. People told me that a candy called applets and kotlets is similar to Turkish Delight, but it is not. Story 30. I read the series quite late, so I have already discovered such misleading and outdated concepts in literature like these. Story 31. I remember reading this as a child and thinking it was the best-sounding treat of all time, magical even. I think it is a good candy, but nothing like the book description. Story 32. I tasted it as applets and kotlets long before I read the book, so I already knew I didn't like the unpleasant texture. Story 33. Our teacher brought in some fries Turkish Delight from New Zealand in the 1980s and loved it. I would definitely have gotten in the van. Story 34. Friends of mine went on vacation to Turkey when I was about 30. I was cat-sitting for them and they wanted to pay me. I said no. They could just bring me Turkish Delight and a book. I don't remember thinking it was good, but it was such a childhood dream realized that it didn't matter. Story 35. Not at all. I had tasted applets and kotlets, which are very good, and knew that Turkish Delight was similar. Story 36. We read this in school and then begged our teacher to bring us some. What a disappointment. I hadn't thought about that in years. Story 37. Standard TD is not desirable. The chocolate-covered variety is exceptional. Do not confuse the two. They are not the same. Story 38. The best I have tasted actually came from India. I couldn't believe it was better than actual Turkish delight. Story 39. I understand it was wartime, but for that, I wouldn't betray an enemy for that. When I discovered the witch enchanted the food, it made more sense. Story 40. My mother loved it, but I cannot stand it. It is too gooey and too sweet for me. I have tried it from all kinds of authentic Turkish places, even homemade. It is not for me. Story 41. I disliked the product. After watching the movie, it became one of my favorite treats. It has fewer calories than chocolate. Bonus. Story 42. I actually liked it. I enjoyed it enough that I wouldn't sell my family to a witch, but it was delicious. Story 43. As a child, I thought it was a turkey-based treat and honestly believed it sounded unappealing. When I discovered what Turkish delight actually is, I was pleasantly surprised to find that it was not turkey encased in some kind of red gelatin. Story 44. I don't know if it existed when I was a child in the mid to late 2000s. I thought it was a made-up candy, like in cartoons, since I had never seen it sold in my life. Story 45. Not at all. Unlike many people, I had some really good ones. I tried a few flavors and liked orange best. I suspect that most people tried rose-flavored ones, which I don't think are very good. I liked the texture too. They were soft and gummy-like. Story 46. Turkish Delight and Soma from Brave New World were two things I could not wait to try. Yes, I ended up experimenting with drugs a bit. Story 47. I was very confused because I thought they were eating chunks of corned beef. To this day, 50 years later, I still have no idea why my young mind interpreted it this way. Story 48. Not really disappointed. Everyone has favorite things. Jellied items can be enjoyable. I believe you overestimated how good it was based on those books. I still wish butterbeer were a reality, though. Story 49. I am very disappointed. I expected something like a C's candy, but it was more like a small square of flavorless gelatin. Story 50. I don't mind Turkish delight, but since my maternal family is British, I didn't have high expectations of what a British child during wartime considered a delicacy. Story 51. A version from the 90s made me think it was something exciting. It appeared to be steaming, possibly from dry ice, although I was not aware of that at the time. Story 52. I may be a minority, but I actually like Turkish delight, though I'm sickened at the thought of eating an endless amount of it. 1 to 2 pieces is usually plenty. However, I actually pictured a dessert my grandmother would make around Christmas, divinity with pecans set into it. It literally melts in your mouth and, even though it's almost pure sugar and would be harmful to me, I can imagine wanting to indulge excessively in it. Story 53. This is because you have only tasted the cheap version made with sugar. That is an inferior version compared to the proper one made with honey. That is a treat. Story 54. Yes, it's fine, but I feel like the description in the book makes it sound creamy, almost fudge-like in consistency. That is not how I would describe the Turkish delight I have had. Story 55. I watched the Turkish drama series, Magnificent Century. The characters always have dishes of Turkish delight sitting around, so I decided to try it. I ordered a few different varieties and enjoyed them. Story 56. I didn't get a wild idea for Turkish delight from the book, but I have always liked it. So, there is no disappointment here. Story 57. There was a limited edition Tim Tam Turkish delight flavor that was surprisingly good. The rose flavor was balanced by the cookie and chocolate. Story 58. I had already eaten it before I saw the movie, so when I saw it on screen, I was somewhat confused about why it was considered such a great treat. I mean, it can be pretty tasty, but not worth betraying your family. Story 59. It was a wonderful pink rose-flavored Turkish delight dusted with powdered sugar. I was not disappointed. Turkish delight is delightful. Story 60. I was surprised. Turkish delight is tasty, but it made 30 pieces of silver seem like a few troy ounces of gold. Story 61. I had already eaten Turkish delights before watching the movie, but I love them. Often, desserts are far too sweet, so I prefer those on the less sweet side, like Turkish delights or Anko. Story 62. My dad would get them from time to time. I never wanted to try them because they looked terrible. The lion, the witch, and the wardrobe gave me the confidence to finally try one. I was very disappointed. Story 63. It was exceptional. I first tried it from a high-end Turkish store that specialized in making it. The dessert was phenomenal, sweet, but not overly sweet, bouncy, and fun to chew, with a delicious blend of pomegranate and rose, complemented by a touch of pistachio. I completely understand the appeal now. Story 64. I was disappointed, though I heard about it from the Aubrey Maturin novels, not the Chronicles of Narnia. That's because I really don't care for rose water. I have since learned there are other flavorings, and I would certainly give those a try. Story 65. I will forever defend Turkish Delight. I faced criticism for my devotion to it, having received 3 boxes at once, which was too much for me. However, in moderation, as a Christmas treat, it can be pure heaven. Perhaps I'm just too British or not British enough, as the rest of my family seems to dislike it. Turkish Delight till I die, even the fries variety that some say tastes like rubber. Story 66. My teacher brought some to class one day because I think we read that book, though I don't remember it very well. Tasted like soap. I thought it would be good, but it wasn't. It was just like soap. Story 67. They were good. I actually like the rose-flavored Turkish Delight, but I must say they weren't good enough to make me betray my entire family to a magical which I've just met. Story 68. My first experience was with fries, which I loved as a kid. Later, I tried the fresh variety, and it was so good. The boxed option satisfies my cravings, and I usually choose the citrus flavor. However, I cannot stand the rose flavor at all, and I'm not a fan of the pistachio either. Story 69. Disappointed? No, the rose flavor is really good. I rarely taste things that are purely floral without being herbal or plant-like. Tasted just like how a rose smells, and I enjoyed that a lot. Story 70. I first encountered it at Rodman's in Maryland in the early 2000s. Apparently, delight has a different meaning in Turkish. Story 71. Not disappointed at all. I think it's great. However, I also like the confection covered in chocolate that I've only found in Canada. I believe it's called Big Turk. Story 72. We performed this show in high school, and our teacher brought it in. We all eagerly grabbed for one, but promptly spat it out and complained in unison. It would have been a great viral moment, but this was before cell phones. Story 73. As a Canadian, I have been eating Big Turk chocolate bars, which are essentially Turkish Delight wrapped in chocolate, since I was a child. Tasted exactly as I expected. Story 74. As a child, I thought it was a pasta dish. I was in my 20s when I discovered it was a candy. I have still never eaten it. Story 75. A Turkish army officer gave me some food a long time ago when I was in Bosnia and Herzegovina with the United States Army. I thought it was delicious. Story 76. I love Turkish Delight. I never got along with my sister. I probably would have done the same. It seems like a win-win situation. Story 77. I love this question. In Canada, there is a candy bar called Big Turk. It is a core made of Turkish Delight covered in chocolate. It was one of my dad's favorites, so we had them often. Took me a while to realize that this was somewhat similar, and I was puzzled as to why anyone would be so fond of this candy. When I got older and moved to an area with more Middle Eastern bakeries and stores, I tried the real thing and remained confused. I can completely understand being enticed by a really good baklava or honey pastry treat, but not by rose water jelly. Story 78. Stop, that's hilarious. It's a deeply shaping moment for me, learning about holding high expectations. I'm glad I'm not the only one affected by this. Story 79. On a related note, after I watched The Nutcracker as a child, I started asking my mom to let me try sugar plums because of the sugar plum fairy. Mom eventually got them for me, but also explained that they aren't actually plums. They are just sugar candies, so don't expect much. You know what? They were pretty good. They are essentially layers of sugar, yet they oddly have their own distinct taste. If you have ever wondered why those kids had visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads, In that Christmas song, you should buy sugar plums. Just make sure they are from a real candy maker, not online retailers. Story 80. I can't think of Turkish delight without remembering a scene from an episode of The Young Ones from 1982. The relevant part starts about 50 seconds in. Story 81. My coworkers brought it in when they returned from India, talking it up as if it is the best thing ever. That is a confectionery mistake at best. Story 82. I tasted Turkish delight for the first time when I was 14, and it is still my favorite treat, even though I now find it too sugary and rarely finish it. Story 83. Turkish delight is not the best dessert that Turkey has to offer. It is simply the one that travels the best. Story 84. I was excited when I saw it in a store. Then I tried it and it was awful. I lost a lot of respect for Edmund, who would sell their family out for such garbage. Story 85. I tried Cadbury's Turkish Delight chocolate bars, and I loved them as a kid. They were available at some Middle Eastern grocery stores. I know that they weren't the authentic original Turkish Delight mentioned in the book. When I reread the books later, I thought of them as those. I have had actual Turkish Delight, and I enjoyed that too. Story 86. I read it in school as a child, and our teacher made us delicious homemade Turkish Delight because none of us had ever tried it. I was not disappointed at all. Story 87. I imagined a savory morsel of heaven, not a flourless fruit cake. My 11-year-old niece just went through the same thing. Lewis is ruining countless generations. Story 88. I really like Turkish Delight, especially rose or pistachio flavors. I would definitely get into a sled with a witch to enjoy some. Story 89. It's awful. It tastes like someone doused your chocolate with grandma's perfume and then rolled it in carpet cleaner. I would never try it again. Story 90. Not as disappointed as when I realized they were more gel-like than a beautiful, shiny golden, chocolatey, and nutty ball of decadence. Almost like a Ferrero Rocher that had an edible golden wrapping with patterns on top. I have no idea where this mental image came from, but I'll blame it on the fact that I was about 6 when I read it. Story 91. Follow-up question. How was Jadis able to fabricate Turkish Delight without knowing what it was, let alone the recipe? Story 92. As a Canadian who had never heard of Turkish Delight, my childhood mind thought it was a turkey wrap. I finally tried it as an adult when a friend brought some back from Turkey and was amazed. Story 93. I was in a production of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in college. My friend made homemade Turkish Delight for opening night. I had heard it could taste awful, but she made orange-flavored, and I absolutely loved it. I still think about it sometimes. I'm not sure if orange-flavored is traditional, but my friend had to make me my own plate of them on closing night because, to quote her, I wouldn't stop talking about it. Story 94. I wasn't. I ate Turkish Delight as a child, though admittedly it was the chocolate-coated variety. I inherited my mother's love for it. Of course, it would have had more sugar than what Edmund would have eaten, and the chocolate also adds to the flavor. I have tried the non-chocolate-coated Delight and liked it, though I was an adult when I tried it. Story 95. Have I entered a parallel universe where 80% of the population dislikes Turkish Delight? Are you all Americans or something? Story 96. What do you mean by disappointed? I would give up my siblings to an evil witch from another world for a plate of those in a heartbeat. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.